Wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, after Liz Truss takes questions from members of the public, we'll ask, does she look like a Prime Minister? I'll be talking to Alistair Stewart, the ringmaster for the debate, Trevor Kavanagh, to ask him, after all his years of experience, does he think she looks like a Prime Minister? Weatherman John Hammond joins me to talk about droughts and Thames Water leaking 24% of their water. And on Talking Pints, I'll be joined by Mike Porky Parry. But before all of that, let's get the news.
Thanks, Nigel. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Liz Truss says she would reverse the national insurance rise on day one of her premiership, but it may take months to introduce. Taking questions from GB News' viewers in Lee as part of the People's Forum, the Tory leadership candidate said she would also address the root cause of high energy bills and stand up to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ms Truss says we shouldn't be taking money from people in taxes and giving it back to them in benefits.
I would reverse the national insurance rise, and I'd also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy. So from day one, families are keeping more of their own money. I will get it in as soon as possible. But
that's not day one. That's as soon as possible.
I will act on day one to make it happen as soon as possible, but it will happen well before April.
Asked about illegal immigration, the Foreign Secretary says she would introduce a British Bill of Rights to make sure that the government's Rwanda policy can't be overruled by the European Court.
If I'm elected as your Prime Minister, is make the Rwanda policy work by, through the British Bill of Rights, ensuring that we can't be overruled by the ECHR. Because you know that's been a problem, that we had the ruling from the ECHR and that stopped the policy going ahead.
Liz Truss has also promised to look again at the case of 300 war widows who lost their pensions after remarrying.
I certainly will look at that, and I will look at that issue, because I do think it is very, very unfair that war widows who then remarry are essentially penalised.
In other news, Manchester City's Benjamin Mendy has pleaded not guilty to an 8th count of rape. The footballer has already denied 7 counts, as well as 1 of attempted rape and 1 of sexual assault. The offences were allegedly committed against 7 women between October 2018 and August of last year. His trial is due to start on Monday. Donald Trump has refused to answer questions into his family business during a deposition with New York's Attorney General. It's part of a civil investigation into whether the Trump Organization inflated real estate values. In a statement, Donald Trump said he had the right to remain silent. He also denied any wrongdoing and claimed the investigation is politically motivated. And in breaking news, a 47-year-old man has died and 3 other people are injured following a series of firearms incidents which took place this morning on the Isle of Skye and in Wester Ross in the Scottish Highlands. Police say a 39-year-old man has been arrested in connection with these 3 events. which they believe are linked. Officials say there is no wider threat to the public, and we'll bring you more on this breaking story as we get it. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now back to Nigel Farage.
Good evening. Well, tonight it was the People's Forum. Yes, a chance for ordinary members of the public, not just Conservative voters, not just Conservative members, to put questions to Liz Truss. It was held in Leigh, in the northwest of the country. The whole thing was chaired by the ringmaster, Alistair Stewart, and it was interesting because there were some really good, tough questions. Pakistani grooming gangs, what was happening in the English Channel. There was some really good stuff that was debated tonight. I have to say that Liz Truss kept her composure throughout. Of that, there is no doubt. She didn't get rattled at any point during it. But when it came to substance, I must say, I've got a few questions. To begin with, she was asked about the European Union, about all the EU laws that are still on our statute book and what she would do about it. Her answer was astonishing.
So what I will do is I will get all of the EU laws off the statute books by the end of 2023, and I will replace them with much better laws here in Britain.
Well, I don't know. I mean, unless Parliament sits 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, it would be impossible to get all those laws off the statute book by the end of 2023. After all, we were in the thing for nearly 50 years. But I guess, as somebody who was a Remainer, at least she's showing intent. I think her biggest weakness, and where she had a real opportunity tonight to genuinely put herself apart from Rishi Sunak, because remember, this contest has been dominated, utterly dominated by tax and spend, and there have been a variety of U-turns performed by both candidates. But the one issue that is very, very high up in the minds of Conservative voters, and particularly in the Red Wall, is this question of what's going on in the English Channel. What will the government do to stop it? And she was asked a very direct question. Firstly, would she support turning the boats around and towing them back to France? She didn't answer that. But on the crucial question of the European Court of Human Rights, this is what she had to say.
I would do, if I'm elected as your Prime Minister, is make the Rwanda policy work by, through the British Bill of Rights, ensuring that we can't be overruled by the ECHR. Because you know that's been a problem, that we had the ruling from the ECHR and that stopped the policy going ahead. So I would make sure we legislate for Britain that we are in control of our own policy and we can't be overruled by the ECHR.
That's pretty much the same thing as Rishi Sunak would say, and it doesn't actually amount to a row of beans, because all the while we're signed up by treaty to the European Court of Human Rights, it will have supremacy over Dominic Raab's proposed British Bill of Rights. And that, I think, was a big disappointment. That was her big moment to set herself apart from Rishi Sunak, and she chose not to take it, which means this crisis will continue. As I said at the start, she was composed throughout, but I sat there and looked at her, and I asked myself, does she look like a Prime Minister? I want to ask you that question. Do you think Liz Truss looks like a Prime Minister? Give me your thoughts. Farage@gbnews.uk. I have to say, for one, I don't think she does. There are some who say, Mrs. Thatcher, when she became leader of the Conservative Party, didn't look like a Prime Minister. Well, that may be true, but that was in 1975. And by 1979, she did look like a Prime Minister. And I just have this concern that the Conservative Party members will put somebody into number 10 Downing Street who frankly isn't really ready for it. Back to the debate and the way in which it was conducted, and there was one clear winner. One person who stood head and shoulders above everybody else that was in the room. He conducted it all rather like a mathematics master, totally in charge of proceedings. It was, of course, Alistair Stewart, who joins me from Leigh down the line right now. Alistair, well done. I have to say, it was quite spirited at times with the audience, wasn't it?
I thought it was, and I thought, as you well know, because we discussed it many times, we wanted a people's forum. We didn't want a room full of people who are professional interrogators, professional interviewers, sharing too much of what they themselves think about these great issues. And I think we genuinely got that. I thought there was real cut and thrust. I thought two of the questioners who were standout were the young woman who wanted to know whether it was part of government's responsibility to help her raise a deposit because she wanted to get on the housing ladder, and the young lad who said he wanted action from her to stop his university lecturers, for whom he pays a lot of money, going on strike. I thought they genuinely were spirited. I hope and I think that we got the balance right between her giving an answer, them having a comeback, and me just occasionally popping in a little bit of clarification. Just one thing from your overall introduction, which I also thought was very interesting, on the ECHR. In all of my research notes, it stands out crystal clear that she has said, rather like Dave Cameron did about Brexit, I'm going to try and negotiate improvements, but if I can't get them, then we will withdraw from it. I was slightly surprised, like you, that she didn't give that a clear statement of intent right here, right now. We pushed it a couple of times, but we only had an hour. The other final point I thought, which was intriguing, was she's got Tom Tugendhat and she's got Penny Mordaunt on side. She stretched out the hand of friendship to Kemi Badenoch and said, I hope that Kemi will serve with me in my cabinet if I'm successful.
No, absolutely. Alistair, splendid. Well done. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. I know that you will. You did a very, very good job. Yeah, and he really did do a very, very good job. Well, joining me is a Rishi Sunak supporter, Mark Wood MP for Dudley South. And Mike
very
Wood,
close, Nigel. It's Mike.
Did you think... So I said it right second time. Mike, did you think that she looked like a Prime Minister?
I mean, I haven't watched this afternoon's forum, I'm afraid. I've been working in the constituency, and clearly I'm not here to criticise other candidates. I like Liz. I admire Liz in many ways. I just think that Rishi is the stronger candidate to be our next Prime Minister at very challenging times for, obviously, our party, our country, and for that matter, for the world.
OK, so you've decided, Mike, not to join in on the blue-on-blue attacks, which I know Ben Wallace was urging everybody yesterday to refrain from it. But looking at another 10 MPs who've come out in the last 24 hours for Liz Truss, looking at the polls, and I agree they can often be unreliable, it does look very much like Liz Truss is going to win. Do you accept that, or do you still believe that Rishi Sunak has a chance?
I certainly don't think that's a foregone conclusion, Nigel. I mean, I'm perhaps not quite as cynical as me, but I think, whilst we obviously love all of our colleagues dearly, I think some of them may have other motives, perhaps, for coming out and backing the person who's currently seen as the heavy favourite, rather than necessarily who they think would be the best leader or Prime Minister, or necessarily who they're actually going to vote for when they return their own ballot paper. Because what we're getting when we're ringing round our members, and particularly our councillors, and these are people we know are Conservative Party members, we know that they have a vote, rather than the people who are talking to some of the opinion poll firms, is that it is very, very close, and there's still a very large number of undecided voters. So I think there's still everything to play for over the next three and a bit weeks. And obviously we're working hard to make sure people understand why Rishi should win.
Rishi does appear to have done quite a few U-turns during this campaign.
No, I don't think that's true. I mean, obviously, there are some comments that are being compared to what he said in December last year, February this year. And of course, things are different in many ways to where they were then. And so there are some decisions that have been taken purely because the facts have changed now compared to where we were earlier in the year. But I think Rishi has set out a clear and consistent vision for where he sees the economy, getting control of inflation, because as Margaret Thatcher knew, only when you have sound money and you've got control of prices, they're not spiralling out of control, that's the only way you can get the economy growing. You can bring taxes down and actually allow people to keep more of the money that they've earned. So that if you just try and have large reductions in personal taxation at a time when the economy is already overheating and inflation is already very high, you just see prices spiraling further out of control, and it's all wiped out within months, if not weeks, by the reduction in the value of the money people have.
Well, we'll see. You're keeping faith with Rishi Sunak's campaign. Mike, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, you might have noticed that it's the 10th of August. That's right, the 10th of August. And we've had a whole series of hustings and debates. The ballot papers went out to party members some time ago. But I'm joined by Trevor Kavanagh, Associate Editor at The Sun. Trevor, we're not going to get a result until the 5th of September. What are they up to?
Well, I think that, and as you know, that's after we know how big the bills are going to be for people to have to pay for their energy in future, something like £4,000 to £4,500 extra. Frankly, I think this is a dereliction of duty, of national duty. They should either truncate this election campaign, this process, and have the vote this week or next week at the latest, or one of them should pull out. I think the most likely one would be, the preference would be for an early actual vote.
So the ballot papers are out there. I mean, presumably, Conservative Central Office will know how many of them have been returned. But I guess once you've set the rules for an election, it's difficult to change them.
I don't see why it would be on this occasion. I mean, what we're on the brink of is a national economic emergency, a crisis, and possibly even a potential catastrophe.
So Gordon Brown giving these dire warnings on Monday of this week was right on that?
Yes, I'm not often in the position of backing Gordon Brown, but on this occasion I think he's right in that assessment. And he has actually been through the mill himself, so he knows when a real emergency is coming. And we're talking about £4,500 extra for people who simply don't have that sort of money. The problem here is that you have an electorate, 160,000 Conservative Party members, who are basically telegraph readers. And there's nothing wrong with telegraph readers. No. I'm one myself. But
comparatively well off, most of them, would you say?
Comparatively well off, probably no mortgage to pay. The kids have gone through school. What I'm thinking about is my readers, the Sun readers, the people who are on those average earnings and possibly less than the 25, 26, 27,000. That's before tax, and suddenly they're out of the taxed version of that, they're having to fork out £4,500. Most of them would be lucky to have savings of £500.
Yeah.
And many of them are already in debt on the basis of the electricity bills they're receiving now.
Now, Liz Truss tonight completely refused to say we should cut the 5% VAT on people's fuel bills, despite the fact, and one of the questioners said it was a Brexit promise, and it was a Brexit promise. She has said, though, that she would take the green levy off people's electricity bills. But we've got this debate going on, haven't we? We've got Liz Truss saying she will cut taxes. We've got Rishi Sunak now saying that perhaps there'll be more handouts. What is the right answer, in your view, given the magnitude of what we face?
Well, if the people that I'm speaking to, and people who are speaking publicly anyway, are right in their assessments of what lies ahead, the sort of things they're doing now, offering tax cuts and VAT cuts and green levy cuts, are like sticking plasters on a burst water main. This is really big potatoes. This is something which we've not seen before, not even the oil shock of the 70s or the crash of the 90s or the 2008 financial crisis. We may actually be heading for depression unless we do something truly drastic right now. And in a sense, I would have thought that the person to do that would have been Rishi Sunak, because he did it during the COVID crisis, and he threw money at it, he hurled money at it. And that's what they're going to have to do now. They're going to have to think about the equivalent of wartime crisis measures, and that includes possibly a 30-year bond so that we can simply cap those energy prices to the point where people aren't going to go hungry or destitute in order to pay them.
I think you're right. I think in the end, just cutting a few taxes is not going to cut the mustard. But if they hang on until the 5th of September, and if the preparatory work is not going on between Team Rishi and Team Liz and the Treasury, and I don't think it is, by the time they get into number 10, get ready for a budget, people will have had these bills for a month or so. I mean, aren't they potentially doing themselves enormous electoral damage?
I think so, because no matter what they throw at it in the way of these tax cuts and so on, there'll be no gratitude for it once this hits properly and hard. The fact that they're getting £400 off their energy bills and £300 off their, or in addition to their winter fuel allowance, all of that will be taken as read. It'll be discounted. It needs to be quite dramatic action, and I don't see how, in fact, the Foreign Secretary and the former Chancellor are able to dictate what the Treasury is doing or thinking about right now. And I gather that Kwasi Kwarteng, who's most likely to be the next Chancellor, is drawing up something like an emergency budget. But he doesn't have the wherewithal, he doesn't have the documents as we speak to do that.
No.
And I think that we have, that's why I'm suggesting that they should bring it forward.
I completely understand. Otherwise, they're doing themselves huge harm. Liz Truss is the runaway favourite. I mean, Mike Wood there insisting that Richie's still in with a chance, but I think just the mood music we pick up from all around the country says that Liz Truss will win. She's been in Cabinet for 8 years. Not made much of an impression with the British public, I don't think, during that time. I don't want to be unfair, but I think that's a reasonable way of putting it. She was composed, as she's been composed throughout the hustings that have gone on. Does she, Trevor, does she look like a Prime Minister?
Frankly, at the end of the hustings, I would say she's more impressive than she was when she started. But that's from a very low base. And, I mean, cometh the hour, cometh the woman, you don't know until the person is actually in situ. And I desperately hope that she has what it takes, because there's no doubt that she's going to win this now. The momentum is so far behind her that Rishi doesn't have a prayer. He's going through the motions, which is one of the reasons I think we should curtail this. But she has been saying some of the right things, and she has been sounding a bit Thatcherite, which is always a good thing in my view.
Well, when you're appealing to 160,000 Thatcherites, I guess that's what you do, isn't it?
It's a huge asset, yes. But I think your point was that Margaret Thatcher, who was basically just given a run. I remember people saying at the time, let's give this filly a trot. Unfortunately, she kept trotting and cantering and got away from them. They couldn't change their mind subsequently as they thought they might.
But my point was, in 75...
she had a chance as opposition leader.
Yeah, that's right. And she didn't look like a PM when she first took the job, but she did by 79, didn't she?
She did. But even in 79, she was still at war with her own party. It wasn't really until a couple of years in that she asserted herself in the way that bore fruit. And Liz Truss simply doesn't have the time. And she's learning on the job, and there's no time to learn on this particular job.
It's going to be very tough, isn't it? Very tough for the Conservatives. And Keir Starmer?
Well, that's their greatest asset. I mean, he's the only reason people won't be saying after 12 years of the Conservatives in power, they haven't done a good job, which is the case.
But he's not Jeremy Corbyn.
He's not Jeremy Corbyn, and of course you've got this financial crisis, which will be blamed on the Conservatives who have been in power that long. Yeah. So I think the terrible prospect is that we might see Keir Starmer as our next Prime Minister.
I rather believe that too. Trevor Kavanagh, thank you very much indeed. In a moment, we'll be joined by John Hammond to talk about the weather, to talk about hosepipe bans. Is it fair that Thames Water could be about to bring in a hosepipe ban when they lose 24% of their water in leaks every day? I'm not sure. Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up on The Mark Steyn Show, as energy bills are projected to surpass £4,000 a year, Alexandra Marshall will be asking if nuclear power is the answer to lowering the cost of electricity. Our statsman Jamie Jenkins will be digging deep on the facts, which raise questions on how we ended up in this crisis to begin with. Plus, human rights activist Yasmin Mohammed will be revealing why grooming gangs are rife in towns right across the UK. All that and more on The Mark Steyn Show tonight from 8 o'clock.
Well, Liz Truss went through a pretty tough interrogation from members of the public there. She did keep composed throughout, I'm granting her that, but I asked you the question, does she look like a Prime Minister? I just don't think she does. Trevor Kavanagh doesn't think she does. Of course, we'll find out, I guess, on the 5th of September. I asked you for your thoughts. Jane replied, no, definitely not. She doesn't have a presence in the studio, let alone at PMQs, G7 summits, or being generally assertive. It's a no from me. Diana says, yes, she does. Hashtag never Rishi Sunak. I sense, Diana, you are a political activist. But I voted Liz. Fine. Stuart says, do they have to have a certain look? I'd let Quasimodo have the job. It's the brain and the ability I'm interested in. Look, I'm not talking about her looks. I'm talking about her demeanour. Does she have authority? When she speaks, do you think she really knows what she's talking about? That is the point that I knew I'd get criticised for raising this question. Ian says, looks like Maggie Thatcher, lies like Boris Johnson, and waves her hands around like a prima donna. What choice do we have? And finally, Ryan says, she's not very exciting, quite wooden in her answers, so I can see less PMQ debates. I can see PMQ debates being rather dull. However, she's the best of two bad choices. Perhaps with open primaries, the contest would have been more interesting. Well, with open primaries, all sorts of people would have been in this race, some possibly even sitting in this chair. But that's another issue. Now, I'm very pleased to be joined by John Hammond, meteorologist at weathertrending.com. John.
Good evening, Nigel.
It's a good time to be a weatherman, I guess, really, isn't it? Because
it's good for business. Yes, everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, I think there are more people tonight in the pubs talking about the weather than talking about Rishi v. Liz.
I think you're probably right.
I'm pretty confident about that. Now, driving in today, you know, coming through sort of the outskirts of London, noticing that the horse chestnut trees are
drooping.
Well, actually turning quite brown.
Yeah.
In places, quite a few leaves coming down. Farmers saying crops are down, etc. It looks and feels a bit like, I mean, I'm old enough, you're probably not, but
I am. I know what you're going to say.
But it does feel and look a bit like 1976, doesn't it?
Sure does. And I was of an age when it was fantastic, you know, sunny, hot days every single day through the summer. I remember bathing in Chichester Harbour and it felt like bathwater. But on a serious note, yeah, that is always the benchmark, isn't it? Whenever we have a heat wave, whenever we have a drought, we refer it back to 1976.
And 76 was a giant anticyclone, wasn't it?
It was. It was a freak event, if I can use that term. And because it was so unusual, it stood the test of time. And so, you know, with every heat wave, we compare it back. And few, if any, have actually sort of matched up to 76. This summer is going to be a close call, certainly in terms of heat and drought. And certainly the first 6 months of this year are comparable with the first 6 months of 1976, almost as dry.
Now, we were in dire trouble then with water, weren't we? Standpipes and all. We're not in. Things are not as bad as that.
Really good point. And the reason for that, Nigel, was that 76 came off the back of a very hot and sunny 75, actually. 75 was dry. The intervening winter from 75 to 76 was dry. So already groundwater levels, reservoir levels were very depleted as we went into the summer of 76. In contrast, this time around, Last year actually was a pretty normal year in terms of rainfall.
It's a terrible summer, wasn't it, last year?
So now we had our dose of wet weather. So reservoir levels, groundwater levels were actually reasonably high when we went into the spring and summer. So that's the reason, actually, we haven't had that many hosepipe bans announced yet by the water companies. And actually, I was listening to somebody from Anglia Water a few days ago, and she was pretty laid back about the possibility of having a hosepipe ban through this summer. So she thinks the real concern is next year. If we now go into a dry autumn and dry winter, then we've got to worry about
Yes, Hampshire Isle of Wight with hosepipe bans, Kent and Sussex coming in on Friday.
Correct.
And Thames possibly, hence my comment about the 24% leakages at Thames Water. Which,
although, again, they would argue that there are fewer leakages than there used to be.
Yes, no, and they do argue that very, very strongly, but the numbers still look to be quite big. So this current heat wave going to go on for the next 4 or 5 days?
It's going to be a voyage of discovery. What we think over the next few days is that we'll peak at around 35, 36, 37 on probably Saturday. But in the run-up to that, most of us actually through England and Wales tomorrow and again on Friday and Saturday will be way up into the 30s. Today, as a point of reference, a few places, Nigel, got up into the low 30s. Most were in the high 20s. It was hot enough. But I think people are going to struggle over the next few days as we go up a notch or two higher.
But you say that, John. I mean, you know, OK, 1976, it was extremely hot, week after week after week. But I don't remember anything like we had a few weeks ago. We were told for the Monday and Tuesday of that week, don't leave your house. You'll die if you go outside. It's all a bit over the top, isn't it?
Nobody said you'll die if you go outside.
Well, pretty much.
I'm on record to have said on air that that there will be a higher level of deaths through that hot spell, and the records, the ONS stats will come in, and they will show that the deaths went up through that period, and again through this heatwave period.
Doesn't cold kill more people?
I'm not an expert on the number of people who die from cold as opposed to heat, but we want to mitigate, we want to reduce the number of deaths come what may, don't we? Which is why the Met Office has issued an extreme heat warning.
It strikes me,
a
bit alarmist. Now, John, I know you're a believer that what we're seeing here is climate change. The Earth is warming.
It's a symptom of climate change.
The Earth is warming. I buy that. I get that. Whether it's man-made through CO2, there is more open debate. But let me ask you this question. We're being told this warm, dry spell, water levels falling, is part of climate change. I've just come back from America. 39 people died in the Midwest last week because of severe flooding, and the New York Times state categorically that because of climate change, rainfall numbers will be higher. Which is it?
Bit of both. We're going to get more extreme rainfall events, and we're going to get more
you can't have it both ways. Come on.
No, the climate models and actually the climate stats over the last 30 years or so bear that out. So winters are getting wetter, which in one sense is a good thing because it will replenish those groundwater levels and those reservoir levels. And winter rainfall is so important when it comes to situations like this. So it looks like winters are going to get wetter but milder. Summers, there's no actual trend in terms of rainfall, Nigel, but what's happening is we get longer dry spells, and then when it does rain, it all comes down at once, so we get severe flooding events even in the summer. So there's no real trend for summer rainfall on average, but there is a trend for winter rainfall.
Now, finally, as the weatherman, I'd like to know what the next month's going to be like, please.
Again, really good question. So this dome of high pressure, which is giving us this heat wave, computer models really struggle. They tend to sort of prematurely break down these domes and introduce much wetter Atlantic air. They're trying to do it now, so they're hinting that next week will be wetter and cooler. I don't know whether that's going to happen as quickly as the computer models suggest. I think slowly it'll cool down next week. There will be some showers, but we need more than a couple of showers, Nigel, to solve a drought. So fingers crossed we will see some welcome rain for the farmers, for example, through the latter part of August and into September. Whether it'll be enough to stave off concerns about drought next year, we'll see.
So basically reasonably good weather?
Reasonably good weather. I think it should please most folk, even holiday makers. A bit of sunshine, a bit of showers through the rest of August.
I've got to say, I love the sunshine. Having a great time. John Hammond, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. And allied to that, we've been talking about farmers. Now, it is pretty extraordinary. We've seen these protests, as you know, in the Netherlands. Well, the same thing's happening in Ireland. Under the lump sum exit scheme, believe it or not, farmers are being offered up to €5,000. That's about £4,200 for every cow they cull. Yes, that's right. They're being given money to kill their cows because Ireland says too much of its CO2 production and nitrogen production comes from dairy cows. And it hasn't happened here yet, but already we've seen farmers actually being paid to leave the business. I have to say, the idea that we're going to stop producing our own meat because somehow, somewhere, we think that it's a good idea to cull cows goes against everything, frankly, that I believe in. I don't know about you, I think it's absolutely mad. Right, before the break, a few more thoughts from you at home. Neil says, I was watching Truss, very uninspiring. She has not ignited any fire in my belly. As you said, probably the least worst of the two. I think I'll fill my belly with Peroni instead. Seamus says, yes, she does, invoking the spirit of Margaret Thatcher. Neeraj says, no way. Ian says, as much as any opposition politician in Parliament these days. One thought. I said to you earlier this week that I had noticed, certainly in Kent, a spate of Turkish barbers opening. But when you investigate, they're not Turkish barbers. They're Albanian barbers. I genuinely believe this is linked to what is happening in the English Channel. I showed you those TikTok videos last week, and we learn that 40% of those that crossed the Channel for a period in July had come from Albania. I am deeply suspicious about all these Turkish barber shops and their purpose and their function. It seems to me it is possible, and I won't go further than that at this stage, but possible that they are being used as centres through which substantial illegal drugs money is laundered. But it's very difficult to find out how many of these shops are springing up, where they're springing up, without writing to every local authority in the country. Am I right in what I'm saying? Are you seeing at home a spate of Turkish, in inverted commas, barber shops? Let me know if you're seeing this in your area. Farage at gbnews.uk. I'll be very, very pleased to get your feedback. In a moment, it is Talking Pints with veteran journalist Mike Porky Parry. Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, sometimes, just sometimes, I question the sanity of the guests that I get on Talking Pints. And before I introduce Mike Porky Parry to you, please have a look at this little exhibition that he made of himself. It has, through YouTube across the globe, actually made him more famous than all of his decades in hard-working, honest journalism. It's completely lunatic, and do not try this at home. But here is the cinnamon test with Mike Parry.
2, 1. Water.
Mike Parry, welcome to Talking.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the intro.
No, well, it has had tens of millions.
Hundreds, about 300 million.
Views.
About 300 million views around the world since we did it. And do you know what? It nearly never happened. I had a bit of a heart scare a few years ago.
This is what I've got to say. I mean, what on earth is a man who had major heart failure, was at one point even on the heart transplant waiting list?
Yes.
What are you doing that for?
Well, that was taken in my sister's garden. My nephew, obviously my sister's son, said this was a big rave going on around the world. Why don't you try it? And the reason it's worked, Nigel, is because I was immediately dismissive of what it was all about. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, I'm tough.
Yeah, and I've been trained to take pain and all that kind of stuff. And of course, you know, I looked so foolish when it happened. But my nephew was so worried at how convulsed I got, he nearly switched the camera off and came and ran over to help me out.
Yeah.
Thank God he didn't, because that is, you know, part of my lifelong legacy, really.
Yes, but a pretty stupid thing to do for a guy that's had serious heart trouble.
I feel I've known. I've been offered a lot of money and a lot of opportunities to do it again. And, of course, I won't, because I realise now how dangerous it could be, you know.
20 years ago, you had this terrible heart problem.
Yes.
Where are you now, health-wise?
Well, I was on the heart transplant list for about 7 months.
Yeah.
And I realised my life was disappearing. I'd lost a couple of jobs on the radio station I worked on TalkSport. I was the programme director there, and I did the morning breakfast show with Alan Brazil, and it all was disappearing. Can I tell anybody, if you want your career to keep going, don't get ill, because once you do, you're forgotten about. And I'm not saying that bitterly or you know, with regret, but we work in fast-moving environments in this industry, the communications industry. And if you're not communicating, somebody else has to fill in for you. And they might be better than you, or they might be pretty good. You get left behind. It's just life. I'm not bitter about it. I came back and I rebuilt the career, and now I'm delighted to say I do more in television, sitting here with you, than I do in radio.
But you've lost weight and you've got yourself...
Well, I lost about 5 stone in the immediate aftermath of the heart problem, and that was one of my problems. I was massively overweight. And we led very, very demanding lives. Mr. Brazil and I would do a breakfast show from 6 in the morning till 10 in the morning. We'd then jump into...
I mean, this was the famous TalkSport.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And actually, it was quite revolutionary.
It was completely revolutionary, because what I would say we did is we introduced what I'd call tabloid radio. Until we got going, nobody had ever thought to go and invite, you know, the chief football writer of the Daily Mail onto radio. And we started that. And now, of course, a lot of those guys in Fleet Street have second careers as pundits in radio and television. We started all that. But we would finish a radio show, jump into a car, go up to Newcastle, do a fans forum in the evening with Peter Beardsley and Newcastle fans. That would finish at 1 in the morning. Then we'd sort of have a couple, you know, and then get up again at 5 o'clock and do it all over again.
Yeah, and Alan Brazil you work with, I mean, extraordinary character.
Most extraordinary man I've ever met. I mean, more energy than I've ever seen in anybody. I mean, to talk about Al as being indefatigable, I think that's the way you pronounce it, is the description for Al. Nothing's ever stopped him.
He's never troubled the scorer with sleep too much, has he, or anything like that?
No. I mean, the thing with Al, he just goes on. Al lives his own life. and he is a bon vivant. I used to call him a bon viveur until David Ginola corrected me and said, no, Michael, it's not bon viveur, it's bon vivant. OK, I said, right, thank you, David. But Al is the absolute bon vivant. Al can have a few drinks all day, go on air, not sound like he's had a drink, come off, have a few more, and then go to sleep and then get back on air the following night. I've never genuinely... 25 years I've worked with Al now, I've genuinely never seen him intoxicated, despite his reputation for being a guy who likes a few beers.
And sport on the radio, whether it's sports debate,
yes, or
whether it's the coverage of live sport, I mean, kind of the BBC letting this all go, aren't they? I mean, even Test cricket, Test cricket.
Yeah.
You know, I've been a Test match special fan all my life.
Exactly.
I don't think it's got quite the charm that it used to have.
No.
And suddenly, a couple of Test matches, it's been on TalkSport too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the charming days you're talking about was when the people who were doing the punditry and the commentary were part of the show.
Yes.
You know, I mean, people criticise Gary Lineker all the time and say he gets paid an awful lot of money, but it's on the pitch. And I think that's true. You tune into Premier League football to watch the Premier League footballers, whereas Test match cricket you're talking about,
yes,
it was a show, and it was a beautifully rounded show.
Yeah.
They used to talk about the lady who'd sent them the cake and what sort of cake it was.
And the bus going down the Harleyford Road and whatever it may be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that was warm, what I'd call warm broadcasting. Yeah. You felt part of it. It was like putting on an overcoat, you know, on a cold day and all that kind of stuff. But the problem, of course, is that the BBC, as you know better than I do, has moved from being something you got for £149 a year to a tax that you have to pay, and all the massive international communications corporations can outbid you now on anything, literally anything.
Yeah. I mean, I love sport, you know that. I love all sports.
Yes.
I kind of follow them all as much as I possibly can. And I must say, if I'm in the car on a Saturday for 10 months of the year, 10 months of the year, and it gets to 5 o'clock, I'm straight on to 5 Live.
Absolutely.
I'm straight on to 5 Live.
Absolutely.
You know,
James Alexander Gordon would have been your man.
You know, but I loved all of that.
Yes.
You get the music, you get the football scores, 2 or 3 teams you're following.
Yeah.
You know when it is.
Yes.
And the BBC are giving that up. Are they just handing this to commercial radio?
No, what they're doing is somebody else has come in. This happens all the time in broadcasting now. Somebody else has come in. First thing you have to do, I'll make my mark on this show. I'll make my mark on this station. I'll do something revolutionary. And do you know what a lot of it is all about? It's about, I've got to become relevant. The best way you can become relevant when you're running something that's successful is to do nothing and let it keep going. A lot of organisations now have decided to devote a lot of their time and energy into what they call diversity. And I'm all for diversity because I want to make sure that the people I'm broadcasting to are relevant to what I'm saying. I want to make sure that the people around me feel inclusive with me and understand my method of operating, and I understand theirs. I want younger people to come in. I want people from, you know, different origins than mine to be working with me.
And to reach a bigger audience.
And to reach a bigger audience. But that's the crucial point you've just made. It's no good going through that sort of exercise if all of a sudden the figures, which have been going like that for years, suddenly start going like that, because that's not the object of the exercise.
Football, you know, Everton man, and you love the game, and you've done, you know, hundreds, thousands of hours of commentary on football over the years. I have to say, I was a little bit sceptical about women's football.
Right.
Or maybe I was a bit ignorant about women's football. Wasn't that terrific the other week?
It was absolutely fantastic, and they definitely crossed the line there into what I would call now a recognised major sport, you know. And also they managed to overcome a lot of the doubters. Right near the start, 20 years ago, I used to have conversations with people from Coventry and all that about women's football and all that kind of stuff, and I was a sceptic. I thought it'd never catch on. However, what I think we have to understand is that men's football and women's football are different games.
Yes.
They're different games, and they're almost different cultures. Because the reason why you get such big crowds at women's finals, largely 80% of it is usually female, is because it's such a wonderful atmosphere. It's such a beautiful place to be.
Yeah.
It's so embracing to be able to take your children and not feel fear or antagonism, not to hear bad language, because whatever you say about men's football, It is based in tribalism, and that tribalism spills over time and time again. To this day, everybody says, oh, we conquered, the hooligan problem. We haven't. We haven't.
Not at Wembley last July for that Euro final.
And not when Manchester United's coach turns up at Liverpool or Liverpool's coach turns up at Manchester United. Yeah. There's still, missiles and all that kind of stuff. So women's football, and let's embrace it for what it is and the success it's brought this country. Yeah. It's a different game to men's football, and I want it to stay that way because I don't want it to take on all the negatives of men's football.
That's a good point. Yeah. Mike, before doing sport, well, you've done it. You did other types of journalism, and in Northern Ireland during the Trouble, and Libya during the bombing, and doing some dangerous, frontline stuff.
Yeah.
Do you prefer doing the sport to doing that?
Well, each has got its merits. I used to say about sport, right, and I had a lot of conversations with the guys who we brought on to talk sport, who were match reporters.
Yeah.
It's not that challenging to sit in a press box for 90 minutes or 2 hours and report on men kicking a football around. And I was able to say that because none of the guys I was talking to had actually been in the Al Kabir Hotel in Tripoli when the US Air Force bombed it and smashed the place to bits, and you were literally crawling out of the rubble,
Yeah.
Which is not a very nice thing to be doing at the time, but you look back on it and you think, wow, what an experience. Whether... I think every football match is basically the same, if you see what I mean. It starts at one time, it ends 90 minutes later, and there's a result. So doing non-football, and I've done World Cups and European Championships, South Africa and Germany and all that kind of stuff, doing non-football is much less predictable, and I think it's the lack of predictability in all our lives, and you've been in politics all your life, that's one of the most unpredictable professions of all. I think that's what keeps you going.
I get the point.
Yeah.
Now, part of your journalistic career, pre-sport, was one of the most extraordinary and I suppose now historic, tragic but historic moments. You were at PA.
Yes.
It was 1997.
Yeah.
It was the end of August.
August 31.
What happened?
August 31, I was watching Match of the Day. In fact, that was August 30, because it was Saturday night.
Right.
And Match of the Day was coming to an end, and I got a call from the office. I was the executive editor of the Press Association. And the first information I got was that Diana had been involved in a car crash in a tunnel in Paris. We already knew that Dodie Fide had sadly died. And the first report said that Diana had a broken collarbone, had been taken from the wreckage, was in hospital. But none of it was adding up to me because there was no official information. I went back into the office immediately. I was very lucky to have a correspondent with Robin Cook in Manila. Can you believe that? The Press Association, because it's the agency of record, the diplomatic correspondent was with Robin Cook. I didn't know, but I do now, that when a member of the royal family dies on foreign soil, the information goes between foreign minister to foreign minister. It does not go between prime minister to prime minister, and it does not go from royal family to royal family. The diplomatic way to do it is foreign minister to foreign. My boy was with Robin Cook, the foreign minister. I managed to get hold of him in the early days of mobile phones and to get him to ring me. And I told him everything we knew and said, go back into that room where Robin Cook is. First indication was, he said, funny you should say that. I was on the plane with Robin Cook. We were just about to take off, and the plane was called back to the apron, and Mr. Cook was taken off the plane. Something had to be going on. After a few more checks and another hour and a few more pieces of the jigsaw, I decided we had enough information to release to the world at 4:41 in the morning, Diana, Princess of Wales, has died.
Extraordinary. 25-year anniversary coming up in a few days' time.
Indeed, yeah.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Mike Parry, hell of a story.
Well, that's what we're here for, isn't it? That's what our lives are all about.
Hell of a career in journalism.
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
We have a little bit of time left for Barrage the Farage. What have you got for me tonight? John asks, the Tories have a huge majority. Will Liz Truss put a bill forward early in September to leave both aspects of the ECHR? John, you saw tonight she's not going to do it. She's going to rely on a British Bill of Rights, which will be of as much use as a chocolate teapot. Laura asks, jelly deals, pie and mash, or both? Well, Laura, I have to confess, I do like pie and mash, very much indeed, with liquor, obviously. Jellied eels, I haven't eaten jellied eels for some time, but I have no problem with jellied eels whatsoever. Bobby asks, are Iranian drones a serious threat to Ukraine? Well, Bobby, is a bigger question there. Is Iran potentially a threat to world peace? This ridiculous deal that Obama and the European Union did, the so-called nuclear non-proliferation agreement, which Iran was enriched by, broke at every opportunity. I believe Trump was right to break it. I believe Trump was right, actually, to side more with Saudi Arabia. We may not like the way they act, but I do think Iran is a serious threat. Not just their drones to Ukraine, but a serious threat, if I'm being honest with you, to world peace. I am back with you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. from this very chair. But I will now hand over to Mark Stein.
I hate it when you get these food questions. I've got a craving for pie and mash now. I can't satisfy for an hour and 5 minutes. I hate, stop asking him the food questions. There's too many of those. Thank you, Nigel. Great show as always, and an interesting, we'll pick up a little more on that Liz Truss forum with Alistair Stewart as well, especially I thought it was an interesting answer on grooming gangs, of all things. And we'll be talking a bit about that with Yasmin Mohammed later. Also, the way these energy bills are going, that's going to get serious and it's going to get real in the next few weeks. It's a big thing. We'll be talking about that. And we have Vicky Spitt, the very first of our vaccine widows, who was here with us a few months ago, and she's back with us tonight. That's all coming up after the weather.
Hi there, Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Warm tonight and even hotter on Thursday compared with the last few days, although there is one exception. The far north of Scotland will be affected by cloud and some outbreaks of rain as a weather front sinks close to the Outer Hebrides, to the Northern Isles as well. Otherwise, high pressure across the rest of the UK brings fine, dry and clear conditions overnight. I think eastern parts of England will be affected at times by low cloud, mist and fog, likewise for parts of Northern Ireland. But we've also got this area of cloud and rain increasingly affecting the far north of Scotland. 10, 11, 12, 13 for Scotland, Northern Ireland, 15 to 17 overnight for England and Wales. So a warm and in places uncomfortable night for sleeping. A fine start to the day, though, for the vast majority. Plenty of sunshine across the UK. The one exception, once again, the far north and northwest of Scotland, where there will be some outbreaks of rain continuing through the day, although that will ease later. And then temperatures peaking. Eastern Scotland, 30 Celsius, 33 for the heart of England and East Wales. And it's going to turn even hotter during the next few days. A warmer night to come on Thursday nights, and once again, cloudy skies for the north of Scotland. One or two mist patches in the east of England, but otherwise clear spells for many, and temperatures not dropping far below the high teens. So those oppressive conditions by night are returning. And then another very warm, hot day to come for much of the UK on Friday. I think a bit cooler for the east of Scotland, northeast England, where there will be some mistiness around the beaches, and there'll be increasingly cloudy stuff there for the north of Scotland once again. But elsewhere, plenty of sunshine for Friday and Saturday. Temperatures peaking by Saturday up to 35 or 36 Celsius.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as leadership frontrunner Liz Truss attempts to win you over, I'll break down the biggest revelations from the People's Forum here on GB News with the Conservative media's leading ladies, the Daily Telegraph's Olivia Utley and Madeline Grant. Plus, my superstar panel will weigh into Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, entrepreneur and